Hi, welcome to my channel, Look 10 Years Younger. I'm 47 years old and I talk about everything related to healthy aging, whether that is supplements, skincare, treatments, or more. So today we're going to be talking about semen retention or abstinence, or you may also have heard of the nofap movement, where the aim is to help men who are addicted to porn. So I've noticed there's been a massive explosion of these types of videos on TikTok and Instagram, and they make lots of claims about semen retention, stopping aging, giving you more energy, enabling you to perform better at sport, stopping hair loss. And I wanted to make a video to look into these claims and also where all this came from, so you can make your own mind up about whether this is something you'd want to follow or not. So I've made chapters so you can skip to any section which interests you. Although modern norms view frequent ejaculation as healthy and necessary, that hasn't been the attitude throughout history. For example, in the East, the idea that semen retention is essential for good health was widely held. The ancient philosophy Taoism and also Chinese traditional medicine consider Jing energy to be a vital life force, which is lost via the loss of body fluids, especially semen. Once all your Jing is depleted, then you die, and they consider every ejaculation to be an energy suicide. The retained essence nourishes your body with proteins, vitamins, and minerals. Then you have Dan Wantari. He was the father of Ayurveda. He said, "The secret of health lies in preserving this vital fluid. He who wastes it will have no development." They called this energy ohas, an energetic essence that boosts immunity. It nourishes tissue, vitality, and mental vigor. They considered that this energy would be better spent if it was directed to your work, to charity, to your exercise, or any creative pursuits. Tantra is a 7th century text, and the idea behind sex, according to this text, is that orgasm is not the goal of sex. So waves of pleasure travel up through energy channels throughout the body while you're having sex, and it's not just focused on the genital region. It's all about being mindful and present during intimacy with your partner. The Buddha practiced semen retention as part of his awakening journey. There are Buddhists today who continue this, whether through celibacy or sexual mindfulness. The idea is inner transformation and spiritual awakening. Hindu religion states a divine energy called Kundalini lives at the base of the spine. It can be awakened and travel up through the chakras to the top of the head through breathing or meditation. Once it reaches the head, then the individual has a transformation and a spiritual awakening. But the idea of abstinence being good for health also existed throughout history in the West. You have Marcus Aurelius, Plato, Leonardo da Vinci, Beethoven, and Pythagoras, who all practiced semen retention. When I saw this long list of historical names who had obviously been very successful in their field, I started to think there was something to this. But if you look at more modern figures throughout history, you have Gandhi, Nikola Tesla, Steve Jobs, and Mike Tyson, who all have practiced this as well, who have been abstinent to fuel their vitality and success. We hear a lot about football players or athletes who are told by their trainers to abstain the night before a big game or some athletic competition to make sure that they have the best performance. The writer William Loftus Hare shared the notion that ejaculation led to death. He said, "It's not that animals reproduce because they have to die, they die because they have to reproduce." German thinker Goethe added to this, "It's not that death makes reproduction necessary, but reproduction has death as its inevitable consequence." So you can see there's a historical consensus that equated good health, whether that's spiritually or physically, with abstinence. Now let's look at the other side of the argument. In the modern age of science, how many of these claims can actually be backed up by proof? So firstly, does retained semen actually nourish the body? Unejaculated sperm has a life of around 74 days and then it's reabsorbed by the body. So if you consider that sperm and semen contains nutrients including vitamin C, vitamin B12, zinc and protein, calcium and fructose, you can see how that would nourish the body as it's absorbed back into the bloodstream. Those specific compounds are the ones that our body uses to make brain matter, nerves and hormones. So yes, there's definitely something to that argument. Semen contains oxytocin, which is the love hormone, and serotonin, the feel-good neurotransmitter. If they're also being reabsorbed back into a man's body, then the theory is that it would improve general well-being and mood, but there have not been any studies to prove this, so that's just a theory. The other theory is that if your body has to put more energy into the reproductive glands to produce these fluids because they're constantly being depleted, then that would be depriving other glands and organs in the body from that energy. But if you consider that sperm is always being produced anyway, whether you ejaculate or not, I'm not really sure that argument would hold. So does retention really boost sports performance or give us more energy and vitality? There has been one study which showed that having sex the night before did not affect sports performance at all. So scientifically, I'm not sure that that idea would hold up. What about all these claims about how abstinence can make you regrow your hair and it can slow down the aging process? Well, firstly, there haven't been any studies to prove this, but we don't know whether it's true or not because no one's ever really looked into this in depth. But personally, I would say if you look at priests and bishops and monks who have been abstinent their whole life, they still age as normal. So I'm not really sure that would be true as well. Now I want to go back to the Kundalini theory. So a lot of the posts that I've seen have been using the Kundalini theory of the serpent energy which rises through the chakras, but they've been adding kind of modern science to it and kind of making up their own theories. So they say that semen retention is essential for the Kundalini to rise. And they say the motion is actually going through the cerebrospinal fluid. Now that's a fluid which bathes our brain and our spine and it protects it from impact and it takes away any waste matter. And their theory that if a man is abstinent for around 30 days, then that retained semen will enrich that fluid and enable it to rise quicker and reach the brain. The problem with this is that I found that this cerebrospinal fluid renews itself every day. In fact, it creates 20 milliliters of fluid every hour and the old fluid is constantly being reabsorbed. So I can't see how waiting 30 days, not having a climax, and that is kind of going to go in and stay. It's not the same fluid that's always going round and around. It's constantly being renewed. So that doesn't really hold, but that doesn't mean it's not true again. So according to science, the cerebrospinal fluid system and our reproductive system are two separate systems in the body. They're not linked. At the moment, we don't have a connection. Maybe it's just that it hasn't been discovered yet. But my research led me to something really interesting. So the cerebrospinal fluid is kept in the ventricles in our brain. They're basically fluid-filled cavities in our brain, and the cells which line these ventricles have something called cilia. They're tiny hairs and they can move. So as they move, they create a pulse, and that's basically making a circulation of the cerebrospinal fluid. And they actually did animal experiments in rats where they put dye into the ventricle in the brain, and they watched as the dye did actually go from the brain right down to the bottom of the spine and back up again. So for me, this really backs up the theory of the Kundalini, going round. So some of this may have a scientific backing to it. So what about the accuracy of all these videos on TikTok and Instagram which are making these massive claims? Although there are over 1 million of these posts, there are 0 studies to suggest semen retention has any benefits at all. So a lot of the information I came across online were kind of spiritual videos or new age videos which were AI voiceovers, and they were kind of computer generated, kind of giving the same kind of message again and again, and they had millions of views, but there was nothing backed up by science. There were no links saying click here to read the studies or anything like that. It was based on spiritual opinions. So the National Library of Medicine in America did a study on male health advice online, and they found there's over 2 billion posts about semen retention, testosterone, vasectomy, etc. etc. But most of them are inaccurate and they're providing misinformation to men seeking health advice online instead of going to see a doctor. Is missing out on sex healthy in the long run? There's nothing to say that abstaining from sex is gonna be bad for us at all. Cognitive psychologist Kate Sukal wrote, "It may be that evolutionary speaking, since the orgasm increases the blood flow across the brain so dramatically, it may have developed in part to keep the brain healthy." So post-orgasm, our blood pressure goes down and our body releases serotonin, which is a feel-good hormone, which promotes good mood and relaxation. This can cause drowsiness, but it can also improve our sleep. Another hormone which is released is called oxytocin. This helps us to bond and feel love and attachment. So this will obviously help you and your partner if you're in a relationship. However, if you're avoiding climax, then you're potentially missing out on some of these benefits. And don't forget that sex and orgasm is one of the joys of life. The parts of our brain which light up when we experience orgasm is the same as if we eat a chocolate cake, or if we win a poker game, or if we take drugs. So to avoid this pleasure is quite a big step. You know, you are missing out on a lot. So there are different theories which promote different levels of abstinence. So some people would say you have to be completely continent. You cannot have any sexual activity at all. And some would say you can still have sex, but you have to not climax. So one of the ways you can avoid that is to do something called edging. And that means a man can have sex, but when he feels he's about to climax, he stops himself. There are two issues with this. The first one is that you can get something called retrograde ejaculation. So instead of the sperm being ejaculated out of the body, it basically goes back into the bladder and then it gets urinated out. So the issue here is that a man would be trying to be more spiritual or more healthy by retaining the semen, but when he does edging, he doesn't realize the semen is coming out anyway and he's not had the pleasure of the orgasm. Secondly, you've got Dr. Trish Lee, who has a really fascinating YouTube channel which you can check out. And she says that edging releases dopamine. Now that's a pleasure-seeking chemical rather than a pleasure chemical. So it makes you go back again and again for more dopamine, which can be very dangerous for the brain and can lead to depression, addiction, and all other kinds of issues. But let's talk about other mood-enhancing hormones which we get from sex. Upon ejaculation, men release a hormone called prolactin, which stops the brain producing serotonin, which is the feel-good hormone. This can lead to a feeling of tiredness, depression, or loss of energy. I'm wondering if guys who are just experiencing this normal release of this hormone temporarily are actually confusing this with the idea that their sexual energy is being taken away every time they ejaculate. So I can imagine a situation where a man has been abstinent for 6 months, for example, and then when he finally does orgasm and he experiences this prolactin, it may make him think, oh, you know, I've lost my spirituality, you know, now I feel depressed and I feel down. But probably the experience of the prolactin after such a long period of abstinence would be quite overwhelming, and that may make him think that he's failed or he has to be abstinent again for another 6 months. So now I want to tell you about my 4-month period of abstinence. So I was influenced by the Kundalini and I wanted to become more spiritual and, you know, be able to meditate and things like that. That's really what my motivation was. So my results were, firstly, I did find it more easy to be mindful and to meditate during those 4 months. It was much easier to get into that frame of mind more regularly than before. When the 4-month period finished, I did notice a loss of energy. So, you know, the thought of going to the gym was just exhausting. Everything seemed to be more exhausting, but I cannot put it down to the abstinence stopping. I really cannot scientifically say that was the reason. There was a massive increase in my sex drive during these 4 months. It's like there was an undercurrent bubbling of sexual tension the whole time. So I'm 47 years old, I don't have a massive sex drive anyway, but if you're someone who struggles with a low libido, then this would probably definitely help you because it really boosts your sex drive. And finally, my sleep was really good during those 4 months. However, when it stopped, I started to experience insomnia before, which I used to get. So I would wake at 4 or 5 in the morning every morning and not be able to get back to sleep again. However, we're actually moving into spring at the moment in the UK, and the mornings are starting to get lighter earlier. So again, I can't 100% say that it was the abstinence that helped me to sleep. It could just be that the mornings are lighter now. So apart from those points, I cannot say that 4 months of abstinence made a massive change to my life. It's something you could try, I guess, but I wouldn't necessarily say, wow, go out and do it. So as a conclusion, I would say if you feel a spiritual gravitation to do semen retention, then you should 100% go for it. It doesn't matter what studies have or have not been done. It could also be that over the years to come, there will be loads of studies which actually prove these theories are correct. The other thing is that if you look at these videos about the Kundalini and the cerebrospinal fluid online, this is supposed to be a secret knowledge that only Beethoven and Michelangelo had. So obviously it's not going to be scientifically backed up. There aren't going to be any studies, and no one is going to be talking about this because you're not supposed to know it. So that could be why there's no information out there as well. And finally, if you are addicted to porn, then you should definitely try abstinence. So if you've enjoyed this video, and I have spent a lot of time researching and making this video, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe. If you've got any comments or questions, please put them below. If you have, or if you are currently abstinent and it helps you, I'd really like to know how it helps you. Are there any concrete things that you can, say to us to encourage anyone who's thinking about this? Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.